Welcome to the 25th edition of the International Literature Festival Berlin, and welcome to Isabella Hammad, Enter Ghost, Renarrating Palestine. My name is Leonard Merkes and I'm part of the festival's program team. It's so nice to see so many of you today here in the audience. Yes. So this festival is all about exchange, dialogue, and bringing together different voices. So many of our events are created in cooperation with our partners. And one of them, for many years now, has been the Excellence Cluster Temporal Communities doing literature in a global perspective at Freie Universität Berlin. From this collaboration came the series Echo Echo, and today's event is part of this series. And I'm very happy to hand things over now to Henning Ahrens from the cluster.
Yeah, welcome. It's beautiful that so many people are here. The IAB is an important anchor in the cluster's collaborative network with cultural institutions in Berlin, and we are very grateful for this cooperation. The cooperation exists since 2019, so since the start of the cluster, and since 2021 this series Echo Echo exists. And the series provides a frame to bring research and literature into direct touch, and we co-curate and co-organize events under the label Echo Echo that engage in intermediality and also in temporality. So we explore how different texts are heard in other texts. We explore how media meet and also how different strands of time meet in literature. This event tonight is part of the series Echo Echo, and the topic, the thematic focus of Echo Echo in this year is Ghost of the Past. So Enter Ghost stands in this context. Before I introduce Hanan Natour, who is the host of this evening and this conversation with Isabella Hammad, I want to say something personal. I want to thank Isabella and Hanan for doing this event and for holding space tonight. And I want to thank Lamis and Maryam. You will meet them later in the context of the stage reading tonight. I want to thank both of them for participating in the stage reading and for putting so much effort and energy in this small project me and Katharina Schütt did the dramaturgy for. I am grateful that all of you are here tonight, all four of you, despite the escalating state repression in Germany and Germany's active financing and enabling of the genocide, and the ongoing and persisting oppression and silencing of Palestinian voices in the streets, in institutions, and amongst them the cultural sector. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Hanan Natour. Hanan Natour is a German Palestinian postdoctoral researcher of Arabic and comparative literature at the cluster. And she's also a fellow of the program Europe in the Middle East in Europe. She obtained a PhD in Arabic and literary studies with a thesis on modern Tunisian fiction. And I am very much looking forward to listening and witnessing tonight.
So, thank you. So before we begin, I also would like to thank our partners and supporters of the festival, especially our main funder, the Hauptstadt Kulturfonds, and our host, the Berliner Festspiele. And also a big thank you goes to Dussmann, das Kulturkaufhaus today. It's the 10th day of the festival, so for looking after all of our participants and authors and providing them with great food and drinks at our festival kitchen. And one last quick note, please switch off your phones now and keep them in your bags. Photos, audio, and video recordings aren't allowed. And there will be a book signing right after the event with Isabella Hammad in the foyer at the Fotowand. You're going to see it. And also, as you heard, it's the last night of our festival. So if you would like to stay here, we have a big get together and a big party later at 10 o'clock. It's free entry, and you're warmly invited to join us there as well. So thank you very much, and enjoy the evening.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you very warmly to this conversation with the award-winning British Palestinian novelist Isabella Hammad. Born and raised in London to a Palestinian father and a British-Irish mother, she studied English literature at the University of Oxford. Isabella, it is a true honor to have you here today. After undertaking a literature fellowship at Harvard University, she completed a master's degree in creative writing at New York University. In 2023, Granta magazine named her one of its best young novelists under 40. Her debut novel, The Parisian, in German, Der Fremde aus Paris, was selected by the New York Times as one of the most important books of 2019. And received several awards, including the Betty Trask Award and the Palestine Book Award. Today, we will turn to her newest novel, Enter Ghost, for which she received the Encore Award for the Best Second Novel, as well as the Aspen Words Literary Prize and the Clark Prize, and nominations for the Ondaatje Prize and the Women's Prize. And the book has also been translated into German by Henning Ahrens. Isabella, it means a lot that you accepted this invitation during these times of witnessing a genocide. And despite the clashing discourses which we all find ourselves trapped into, I sometimes find myself unable to think of anything, let alone literature, when recalling the innocent lives of people like you and me, lost in Gaza and the West Bank. As you put it in the afterword to your book, Recognizing the Stranger on Palestine and Narrative, which you originally delivered as the Edward Said Lecture at Columbia University in 2023, you said, "To remain human at this juncture is to remain in agony." And I am thankful that today we can have a conversation about Palestinian literature, which brings our thoughts to the country and to its people. Thank you for making this possible.
Thank you very much, Hanan. Thank you, Seema. Thank you, Leonard. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to make a brief statement before we start talking about literature. I was very surprised to be invited to participate in this festival, having never been invited to speak in Germany before, and given the violent repression here of speech and protest against Israel's genocide in Gaza and in support of Palestinian life and liberation. I was assured by the organizers that I would not be censored, and I decided to come. I want, first of all, to express my appreciation and admiration for the incredibly brave people in this country who have been consistently risking their physical safety by protesting. Germany, as you may all know, has become the second largest supplier of armaments to Israel, accounting for 30% of Israel's arms imports between 2019 and 2023, and increasing their weapons sales tenfold in 2023, the majority of those sales made after October 7th. Last month, the German government finally announced that they would suspend all arms exports to Israel for use in Gaza, although I've just been told that actually there's still many other military links, so this is maybe a bit surface level. Coming 2 years into Israel's brutal campaign of annihilation in the Gaza Strip, after 77 years of occupation of Palestinian land, this is already many, many years too late. But it signifies at least that it is becoming harder even for the German government to deny that the mainstream Western European and North American position on Palestine is morally bankrupt. This is an Israeli genocide, but it is also a German and an American genocide, as well as a British and a French. They say 65,000 Palestinians have been massacred in Gaza, but the number is without question far higher, some experts suggesting figures in the hundreds of thousands. Engineered famine, assassinations of journalists, every single university destroyed, every single hospital attacked, medical infrastructure destroyed, IVF clinics deliberately targeted, doctors in mass graves still wearing their scrubs, their hands held with zip wires, and now this week all power and fuel cut to Gaza City, which is being decimated with no way to record it. Israel's bombs are destroying entire neighborhoods as the military forcibly displaces 500,000 people yet again. Every day is a massacre. In this context, and in the context of the repression here, comparable only perhaps with the level of repression in the United States, it may seem strange that I have accepted an invitation to speak at a German literary festival. I hope it was the right thing to do. But I'm here, and I've decided to take the space to speak, and I'm grateful to these colleagues for the incredible effort they've put in, and for the chance to speak with you a bit about literature, a bit about history, and about Palestine.
It's very nice to feel the support tonight, which is not a given. And so now we will turn to your book, Isabella, which revisits Palestine from different angles. So I'm really honored to moderate this event. Among other things, we share the experience of having a Palestinian father and then navigating life outside of a country which is disappearing from the geographical map. As we will see, this history does something to literature. And Enter Ghost poses questions that transcend the boundaries of your novel. For example, how to revisit a literary locale which is not accessible at all times and never accessible to some, also to some of the characters that you write about. And then on a different level, how to interpret Shakespeare anew in modern times and in a non-European colonial setting. We will be speaking about memories which haunt the protagonists and follow their trajectories back from London to Palestine. Many of them have different points of view, which result from their respective positionalities. We will also have the pleasure to listen to a staged reading of Enter Ghost, which will give you a feel for the dramatic character and elements which characterize this novel. Hamlet here is not only a reference, it becomes a performance in which Shakespeare's text inspires new literary responses. So, Isabella, your novel travels between different literary locales. We have London, we have Haifa, and the West Bank. Maybe you would like to tell our audience about the path of Sonia, the protagonist. What brings her to Palestine, and what does the return mean to her, considering that she grew up abroad?
So we opened the novel, Sonia's coming back to Haifa. There's a little joke there for anybody who knows Palestinian literature, a famous novel called Returning to Haifa by Ghassan Kanafani. And she comes to visit her sister who lives there, and she becomes involved in a production of Hamlet a little bit against her will. So she's a kind of character who's maybe a little bit, she's not unpleasant, but she's a bit brittle. She's unsatisfied with her life. She's unsatisfied with her career as an actor, and she finds some meaning in this. Sort of like becomes reoriented into her community by becoming involved in this production there. She grew up abroad, but she has been back to Palestine throughout her childhood. But of the two sisters, her older sister is the one who stays and works there and is more politicized, and Sonia doesn't really want anything to do with the Palestinian cause. So I was investigating the ways in which families in the diaspora or in exile relate differently to the Palestinian cause and to Palestine when they aren't living on the land, when they aren't on the geography. And that was one of the sort of elements that the book deals with, is how Palestinians of different legal statuses, different experiences, how they relate to one another and how they relate to Palestine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you already mentioned the sister Hanan, who's also an interesting character and who's based in Haifa. It is Hanan who introduces Sonia to the director Maryam. So maybe you could tell us a bit more about the relationship between these sisters and how it plays out in their connection to Palestine. You already started elaborating on this.
Yeah, they have a fraught relationship, as many sisters do. Hanan is kind of like a mother figure to her. So in fact, she comes to Haifa wanting to be mothered by her sister, and her sister has her own stuff going on. Often we demand things of our family members. We act like, we sort of revert to roles, and without necessarily thinking about what they might be going through. So a lot of the novel is tracking the relationship between these two sisters, which also has to do with knowledge and access to their family's history, where Hanan has kept things from Sonia deliberately, but also she was the one who was more interested. She was the one who asked questions. So there's also this sort of relationship between the sisters in that way.
And Hanan is the elder one, right?
She is the older sister.
Yeah. So I also think another interesting difference between the two is that Hanan has an Israeli passport and Sonia not. Can you explain how this came about?
Their mother, it was their mother's decision. Their mother is a daughter of a refugee, and when the marriage fell apart, part of it I think has to do with alienation from Palestine. And she's the one who decided that Sonia should not have an Israeli passport when they were children.
And that is symbolic or representative of the experience of so many Palestinians and this fragmentation, right, of being all over the world and yet connected through words and literature. And then I feel your book really makes a contribution there. In a way, I feel the two sisters search for an identity between several worlds and languages. Right, so I feel your novel captures this engagement through polyphony and multilinguality. Would you agree, and how did you go about it?
So the novel's narrated in the first person. Initially, I had written it in the third person, and it wasn't quite working. And then I'd written about half of it, and then I switched it to the first person, and it began to click into place. I found I designed this character, and then I found it kind of difficult to access. But when I put it in first, it made me think actually the ways in which novel writing might be quite like acting. You sort of put on the character, and suddenly I could sort of understand her a bit more. I could soften her. I could humanize certain elements of her. But then sections of the novel go into play form, and this allowed me, I guess maybe this is what you're referring to, the kind of polyphony. Suddenly you can have many voices in the room without the baggage of the he said, she said, and sort of moving them around, and it allowed me to have debates, sort of funny exchanges when they're having rehearsals with all of these different voices, all of these different perspectives, and Sonia just becomes one of the many. She sort of, we get as a reader and as a writer, I got a kind of breath from Sonia's overwhelming perspective, and suddenly we feel that she's part of a cast, which obviously has then other implications, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Sonia gets invited to join a theater production of Hamlet in the West Bank, as we heard. Now, Hamlet has a tradition of its own in the Arabic context. It is a traveling text that spans literary histories and across different temporalities and geographies. Now, the scholar Margaret Litwin wrote a book which addresses Hamlet's Arab journey, specifically in Egypt. But Hamlet also has a specific literary history in Palestine. So if I'm not mistaken, it was first staged in Gaza And maybe you could tell us just a bit more about these entangled literary histories. What made you choose Hamlet for your story of Palestine?
I mean, I didn't initially, wasn't thinking about using Shakespeare. I was just interested in theatre in Palestine in general. I'd seen a film when I was very young called Arna's Children, which is about a theatre school for kids in Jenin refugee camp, which was subsequently made into the Freedom Theatre, which I know that one of our actresses, Maryam, tonight has been involved in this amazing theatre. And I was very affected by this film, and I was very affected by it really stuck with me actually, this way in which Anna, who's running the theatre, is insisting that this is not therapeutic. She's not trying to therapize the kids out of their anger. And the second part of the film is about them participating in the first intifada, or maybe the second intifada. And I was interested in this idea of the function of art as a sort of like as cultural resistance. It's not sort of softening resistance. This is one of the debates that runs through the novel. So I was interested in theatre in general, and I was interested in it as an art form that is about bodies in space, as an art form that has been particularly subjected to Israeli censorship historically, because of that fact, because it is about bodies in space. There's a sort of historical proximity between theatre and the street and uprising and protest in Palestinian history. And it's a regime. I mean, it's an apartheid regime that, the backbone of it is controlling bodies in space. So it sort of felt like there was something fertile there that I could play with to sort of talk about the political context in a fresh way that would be interesting. So I thought I would use an Arabic play, maybe I would write my own play. And then I thought maybe I should use a play that people would be familiar with. I thought about Macbeth, and then I found Hamlet had this, as Hanan has pointed out, this history in Abd al-Nasser's time in Egypt, where to be or not to be was shall we be or not be. It was this kind of the coming to consciousness of the Arab nation on the world stage as a sort of historical actor. So it had these other connotations. The play that in the West is the play of interiority actually was interpreted as a play of the collective. And obviously, we think of it as this familial drama, but it's a play about states, it's a play about usurpation, it's a play about illegitimate regimes, it's a play about oppression. So I felt that there were these other connotations that I could pull on. And then I also discovered that it had been banned in the Israeli prisons at one point because it was seen as a dangerous text to call, a call to arms, to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. So then I was like, okay, there's lots of things I can play with here,
So the group then goes on to prepare the staging in Arabic. Now that makes it a very interesting dynamics. I thought it would be nice if you could give us a bit of the sound of this multilinguality in which the work of the group takes place. You have this passage in your book where it's basically the famous Hamlet speech, and I thought you have to listen to Isabella read out the Arabic translation and then the back translation into English, if you will.
أأكون أم لا أكون؟ ذلك هو السؤال. Shall I be or not be? That is the question. أمن الأنبل للنفس أن يصبر المرء على مقاليع الدهر اللئيم وسهامه. Whether it is nobler of the soul that a man should suffer the slings of outrageous fortune and her arrows. أم يشهر السلاح على بحر من الهموم. Or to draw weapons against a sea of troubles. وبصدها ينهيها. نموت ننام. And by opposing end them, we die, we sleep.
Thank you. I thought it's important to mention that the Arabic version you work with is by Jabra Ibrahim Jabra, right? The Palestinian writer. And there's also a scene in which the protagonists practice a few lines in the dialect, correct? So there you have this discrepancy between the spoken Arabic and the written Arabic, which creates certain barriers. Would you like to explain how this influences their work on the play?
I mean, I watched a lot of Hamlets in English and in Arabic, and there's Maryam, now I can see her. And I was interested in actually the best Hamlet that I watched in English was with the that actor who plays the hot priest in Fleabag. And part of the reason it was so good, Andrew Scott is his name. Part of the reason it's so good is because he's actually not a Shakespeare actor. And a lot of the times when they perform, when people play Hamlet, they're like, I am Hamlet, and they put on a Shakespeare voice. And this guy, because he's a TV actor, well, maybe not because he's a TV actor, but he doesn't have this sort of fancy training, and he goes to find the spokenness in the language. And he's very conscious of the fact that Shakespeare's English is incomprehensible to everybody. Unless you have a dictionary. We get used to it, if you study it, then you get used to the words, you kind of understand. Actually, I still don't know what a bodkin is, but we roughly understand what they mean. And I watched an interview with him where he was talking about the ways that they would try and figure out, how to bring that archaic, difficult language closer to spoken language so that people could understand it and people could feel it, So even if they didn't totally understand the exact words, they got the sense. So I thought, why don't I make my cast do this? This is also kind of cool, you have a diglossia, you have classical Arabic, and then you have spoken Arabic. So why don't we also try and collapse that and see if the actors get a better, obviously they're all fictional, they weren't real, but I like this idea of as a technique or as a tool.
That's a fantastic idea. Now, Sonia gets invited to play Gertrude, the mother figure. Now, if you think of the mother figure in the Palestinian context, it is also a strong symbol of the motherland and the soil, and not only in Palestinian literature, but also in Arabic literature. I'm thinking of Mahmoud Darwish, the poet, but maybe you would like to share your thoughts about the choice of this mother figure for your protagonist.
Yes, motherhood is a theme throughout the book, being a mother, not being a mother. And a lot of the novel is exploring the role of women in many senses of the word. And in the Palestinian struggle, women is often the mother of the fighter, this sort of. So that's also the mother of the fighter, or Mother Mary and Jesus or Gertrude and Hamlet. There's a kind of icon that runs through the book, so that you have, they go to Bethlehem. It's this sort of recurring motif. Sonia is not a mother. She's in fact somebody who feels completely lost. She doesn't know what her role is, and so I thought it was interesting also to press on that, to have her playing the mother and struggling with it. She develops a kind of maternal relationship with the actor playing Hamlet, yeah, that was it really.
Thank you so much.
Although the other thing I was going to say was that that I also wanted to kind of elasticate what motherhood can be. It doesn't necessarily need to be an actual mother with a child. I think that the novel is also about modes of care. Hanan looks after, the sort of like sisters can mother each other, or friends can mother each other. So there's this other way of thinking about what that relationship is. Yeah.
And there's a few switches of these roles throughout the novel. So I think we could now get to the mid part of this evening. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our two actresses, Lamis Ammar and Maryam Abu Khaled, who will present 3 scenes from Enter Ghost as a staged reading. Now, it is more of a collage inspired by this novel than following it word by word. But I would like to introduce Maryam to you. She was born in Nazareth, so An-Nasra, and studied at the Palestinian Freedom Theatre that you mentioned in Jenin. She has been part of theatre productions in Palestine, Europe, and the US. Since 2016 and 17, she is a member of the Maxim Gorki ensemble. And Lamis was born in Palestine, in Haifa, and has acted across theatre and film productions, latest in Rupert Wyatt's film Desert Warrior, which will have its premiere later this month. She was part of theatre productions at Berlin's Maxim Gorki Theatre and the Volksbühne. And it is also important to mention that Katharina Schütt and Sima Ehrentraut, whom you've met before, kindly supported Lamis and Maryam with the textual adaptation and the dramaturgy of this collage. Please join us in welcoming Lamis and Maryam.
The whole cast is sitting around a table in a cafe in Ramallah. The first read-through has exhausted everyone. All sit for a few minutes in silence. A television above the bar shows a pale man in a suit gesticulating a parliamentary podium before the Israeli flag, followed by a shot of Salim Mansour getting into a car. Salim Mansour runs the headline, temporarily suspended by the Knesset Ethic Committee. Exclusive interview with his colleague, member of Knesset, Sliman Jafar. Don't look at the screen. So, what do we think the play is about?
War.
Good. What else?
Families. Family drama. Free will.
Very good.
Revenge.
Yes, that's a big one. Can we think of anything else, even small things you picked up that stick with you when you think now about this play?
Death.
Yes, there's a lot of death.
Martyrdom. Yeah. Hamlet is a martyr. Shaheed.
That's great. Martyrdom. Anything else?
National liberation.
In what way national liberation?
I mean, if Hamlet is a shaheed,
You mean Hamlet is a martyr, like a Palestinian shaheed?
طبعا فلسطيني ولا what?
Okay. Let's discuss that a bit. I think it's actually very interesting.
Yeah, it's not a very optimistic vision of national liberation if everyone die in the end. This might be a stupid question, but
Nothing is stupid.
which nation is Hamlet liberating? Denmark, no? But are you sure killing Claudius liberates Denmark? Does killing Claudius give Denmark to 40 bars?
يعني.
And then, is Denmark supposed to be Palestine or is Denmark Israel? This time out of joint thing, something rotten in the state of Israel.
I don't think we need to be so literal. There can be suggestion.
Okay, then what about the queen?
What about the queen?
I think she does symbolize Palestine.
And why do you think that?
Because Gertrude is raped by Claudius.
Gertrude doesn't get raped, but please finish that thought.
Okay. Gertrude is, you know, the land who gets انسرقت التعن أبو أبوها.
Looted.
Yeah.
Did anyone else make that interpretation that Gertrude stands for Palestine?
She is raped though, huh?
But remember, اغتصاب means rape, but it also means usurping, like يغتصب الأرض. So in that way. Okay, يا جماعة, let's talk about tomorrow. Sunday, balcony of Maryam's, the director's apartment in Haifa. Sonia is standing by the railing with a view of the sea. The day is overcast. Hearing footsteps, she looks up to see Wa'il coming out to join her. كيف الحال?
ماشي الحال.
Nice to see the sea, huh?
Yeah, if only we had this in the West Bank. Do you remember that story about that guy in the West Bank who couldn't swim?
No, I don't know it.
I can tell it to you. There was this guy who couldn't get a permit. His parents were refugees from Haifa or Haifa, I can't really remember. He kept applying for a permit and they wouldn't give it to him. And he wanted so badly to see the sea. Probably his ancestors were sailors or fishermen or something. Then finally, he married a girl from the camp. And the moment he get married, the permit come from the Israelis almost straight away. And then he went to Jaffa and he swam in the sea, alhamdulillah, finally. And the first time he swam in the sea, he drowned. You know why? I tell you, because he never learned how to swim. Haram.
That's awful.
Yeah, it is.
What an awful story.
It's very awful.
Who was he?
I can't really remember.
You just heard it from someone.
Yeah, or maybe I saw it in a movie. I can't really أتذكر. I guess every family has a Nakba story, la?
Right?
I mean, you must do.
I'm not sure. I had lied to Wael. Of course, there's a Nakba story in my family. I didn't hear it from my father, though. I first heard it from my aunts when I was 11 or 12. في 22 نيسان 1948 وقفت تيتا عايدة على الشباك بالطابق يلي فوق. الشباك بيطل على الشارع. كانت بتحمل أبوي الرضيع وبتراقب جموع الناس الكتير الهاربة تحت. بتراقبهم وهن بيهربوا بين الشوارع باتجاه البحر. الميليشيات كانت سيطرت على وسط المدينة وشاحنات الهجانة معبي الشوارع. بتهدد الناس تحت السلاح باتجاه المينا. من بين كل هالعالم وقعت عيون تيتا عايدة على زلمة ومرته. الزلمة حامل بنت صغيرة ومرته لابسة توب أخضر وشال أسود، حاملة ولد صغير ملفوف بغطا. عايدة شافت المرة أم التوب الأخضر يلي حامل الولد، شافتها نسخة تانية عنها عن عايدة، بس هاي النسخة قررت تهرب. فجأة تجمدت المرة محلها، رخت إيديها ووقعت الولد على الأرض. عايدة صرخت، ولما انهارت المرة أم التوب الأخضر على الأرض، الزلمة يلي جنبها حمل السرة شال الغطا رفعه. كان في إشي أبيض. هاد مش الولد، هاي مخدة. سألناها أنا وأختي، طيب رجعوا لحتى يجيبوا الولد؟ ردت تيتا حاولت، بس جموع الناس كانت كتير كبير. I had no particular reason to conceal this from Wael, except, I suppose, there is a time and a place for every story.
Same day, same balcony, Haifa. The balcony of Maryam's apartment. Maryam enters carrying a chair. She sat down. Sonia and Wael are waiting for the rehearsals to start.
جاهزين؟
ياها.
خذوا نفس شهيق. زفير. Okay, so we're going to do the next part of the scene. Gertrude's part just after Hamlet kills Polonius, but missing out Wael's side of the dialogue. So Wael, you just stand there and don't speak. Don't act or do anything with your face either. Sonia, you know his speeches well enough now in your head. It's important not to rush. The point is, respond to what you are hearing.
Right. Okay. Shall I start?
Great. We'll stop at Enter Ghost. Ready?
Yes. What? What have I done? What have I done that you can dare to fire your tongue against me with this insolence. Oh. Oh. What act is this that roars so loud and thunders in the index? No more. No more. Silence.
Enter ghost. Sonia, you okay?
Yeah.
How did that feel?
Good.
Sonia,
Yeah.
whatever you were thinking about just then, I'm not going to ask what it was, but I want you to think about it every time we do that scene.
حاضر.
So, Isabella, let us talk about ghosts. In our research cluster, we have a group that focuses on magical realism. Now, this is a completely different style of writing, but maybe we can think of the way in which literature transcends the realist. Even, I think I remember a scene where Sonia has this introspection, where she has an experience outside of her own body that made me think of this. But this question also takes us back to the Nakba story mentioned in the reading. I believe there are several layers in which ghosts play out in your novel. Which ghosts were you thinking of when writing it? And does the stage direction which forms the title of your novel mean that we should invite the ghosts of our past back?
First of all, thank you so much to these amazing actors. That was very special for me, so just another round of applause. So it wasn't called Enter Ghost until my agents vetoed the title that I was using, which was the last line of Hamlet is, "Go bid the soldiers shoot." And they said, "No woman will ever buy this." So I had to change it and find something a bit more kind of, grabby. But I like Enter Ghost. Obviously, it means then you're looking for the ghosts. But obviously, the prominent ghost in the story of Hamlet is the father, the ghost of the father. So primarily, I was thinking, I suppose, of the ways in which when a liberation struggle extends beyond the lifespan of a single person, there is this you have this intergenerational connection and commitment that is passed down through generations. So I was sort of thinking about this as a kind of productive haunting by our grandparents and our great-grandparents. And that was the primary ghost that I was going in with. But then there are other ways in which the metaphor was coming out, like Palestinians haunt the Israelis, the return of the repressed, 1948 being an incomplete ethnic cleansing, that Palestinians like the Nasser family in the novel survive, so they're kind of they haunt the Israelis in that way, and I think we can kind of pull out ghosts in literature are often something that remains to be done. So there you are, many ways to spin the ghost, and better not to foreclose interpretation, I think.
Yeah, also some ambiguity that's in that. In terms of narrative, these Nakba stories are particular. They are in the past, but they also still play out in the present. And we could briefly mention your first novel here, The Parisian, where you explore a time before the Nakba, before 1948. But to this day, the Nakba, in Arabic, the catastrophe continues. And this is very palpable in your novel, through the different challenges which the actors face while preparing their stage production. The transitions between Haifa and Ramallah, the inside, ad-dakhil, and the West Bank come with restrictions and including experiences of vulnerability. So we can think of checkpoints, but even when Sonia arrives at the airport and so on. There are also moments of rupture. Actors get interrogated. There are power cuts. There's a spy, soldiers, tear gas. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about these specific conditions. How does the Palestinian context impact the staging of this play in Ramallah? And if I'm not mistaken, there was also an actual staging of Hamlet in Ramallah, right?
Yeah, I know there was a German company that went. Thomas Ostermeyer, I think, took a Hamlet there. And there were, I don't know if there was a recent Arabic production of Hamlet. There may have been as well. Certainly, I mean, everything you're describing is the condition of Palestinians' experience living in historic Palestine in different ways. You know, somebody living in Gaza has a different experience than somebody living in Jerusalem. You have different kinds of struggle. You have different exposure to violence. You have different protections, different, freedoms of movement, levels of freedom of movement, or the lack of. So yes, there is a way in which the novel stages this putting on of a play, which is also about a Palestinian collectivity, somehow trying to collaborate, trying to, where they're going to put it on, how can we get everybody there? So that is all sort of brought in. I mean, I didn't want it to be too, I feel like a little bit, it sounds like it's very didactic, leading you around Palestine. I wanted it to be exploring these things playfully. How do I get across the geography in this way? Which is why my main characters have the most freedom of movement. In fact, I gave them the most freedom of movement for that purpose, so that they could go around all the different places. But even your question is about Nakba. I mean, Nakba is ongoing. We can think about, Patrick Wolf says settler colonialism is a structure, not an event. We can also think about Nakba in the same way, as some combination of apartheid, settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing. It's all of these things, and it's happening now.
In your novel, you re-narrate drama, so that's an interesting twist of genres. I think one character describes Palestinian theater as an act of subtle resistance, and we already talked about that a little bit. What does drama as a genre add to the re-narration of Palestine? How does the performative act play out in this context?
What do you mean?
I mean that if you just write a narrative text about Palestine, you don't have the opportunity to have so much nuance in how these different characters interpret the same scene differently, right? And the staging of it seems to add some layer there.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to milk the theatre metaphor for everything that I could, and one of the ways is to think about performativity in all sorts of ways, and identity as performative. And that's not to say that performative as in it's not real, but as in it's something that people do, like performative language, and to think also about the structure of Israeli state control as also quite performative. The way they interrogate you is very performative. There are certain scripts that they follow. Even the way people dress or the uniforms is a way of thinking about this as performative, not real, but as in it's kind of theatrical as well. And when you start to think about it this way, it's actually very hard for me to think about this novel, certain aspects of the way I designed the novel now, because it was written in 2017. So it was a different reality. But I wanted to think about when you elasticate that relationship between a person and the role they're playing, there's some sort of freedom there. There's something that's not essentialized, that's not fixed, that can be moved around. And that was something that this focus on performance, this theatrical metaphor that runs through the novel, allowed me to do perpetually, not even when they're rehearsing or on stage, but to think about that in human interactions constantly, and the political implications of that elasticity between a person and the role they play.
I think in some other interviews you also mentioned Peter Brook and this aspect of performance and activism, where there's different, categories. He categorizes theater as deadly, holy, rough, and immediate. Maybe you could elaborate what made you merge these genres and these different elements. Which ones were you thinking of when writing your novel, and which ones are the most compelling to you?
I can't remember all of the different kinds, but I do remember that he talks about deadly theatre as being a sort of stale West End theatre that is, always being repeated. It's glitzy. It's velvet curtains and stale. And I sort of wanted that to be the world that Sonia escapes, and that she, by going and becoming involved in this production, she's reconnecting with the possibilities, the kind of sacred possibilities of theatre that as an art form that actually might do something, that actually is connected to something essential, that has some soul, that isn't purely about an industry where, she's kind of aged out of being an ingenue and she's got fewer parts that she can play and she's concerned about her career and so on. So that was sort of, I love that text when I read it back then when I was about to start writing, and I found it very inspiring and kind of fertile. But I didn't really use it as a roadmap, but I did think about the deadly theatre that he does outline there.
Your characters also reflect a lot about catharsis, about comedies versus tragedies, and what Palestinian theatre means. Could you elaborate on this notion and what it means to you? Also perhaps regarding the differences between Palestinian and more generally Arab theatre.
I was thinking of catharsis a little bit like what I mentioned earlier with Arne's children and the idea of art being therapeutic. And this is obviously drawn from Brecht, as you all will know, the idea of alienating the audience so that they become conscious of the political and social conditions that they're living in, and then ideally do something about it. So that was in my mind, and you'll see it in the novel, in the ways in which that was in my mind. And I'm also interested in what catharsis was in ancient Greece. In ancient Greek theatre, I have this feeling that ancient Greek tragedy specifically, first of all, I was amazed to learn that ancient Greek tragedies were only ever performed once. There was no repetition, which is also something that, because we associate theatre with repetition. And in fact, the word for rehearsal in French is répétition, I think. So that alone I found very interesting. But also it seems to me that theatre in that society was at this kind of confluence of democratic forms and ritual forms. And there was the idea of catharsis is a kind of ritual thing. And obviously there have been debates about how to translate it. You feel pity and fear, and then you're purged of these emotions. And so obviously the way Brecht ran with it, and others after him, was that when you're released of those emotions, then you've been kind of demobilized, you've been depoliticized. You go out of the theatre feeling like, oh, I've got all my bad feelings out, and now I can be a docile member of the population. And I think that's a kind of, there's a good argument to make that was what theatre did in ancient Greek societies. You kind of make a docile population. You have a kind of scapegoat, which is the tragic hero who falls and has terrible things happen to that person. And all of those subversive impulses in the society are siphoned off. This is just a theory. I haven't read anything about it, but I like this idea. And the novel is debating basically these things, like what can art actually do? Is it just window dressing? Can it actually make people take to the streets? Or does it have some other function? Is it that we can't think of art as being so tied to a use value? In the 70s in Palestine, the 70s and 80s, art making was very, very close to the Palestinian revolution. It had this very intimate relationship. that was when the thing about the watermelon started up. That was Sleiman Mansour, or at least he claimed to me that he was the one who said, if you ban the colors of the Palestinian flag, I can't even paint a watermelon. And so that became that symbol, right? But there was this in the visual arts and music and theaters, this very close proximity between resistance to oppression and art making. And in the book that I wrote, the question of funding enters. So it's like, how is this play funded? The NGOization of art making all over the global south, but in Palestine, it also has this political implication. How does that mediate the relationship between art making and resistance? So all of these questions were things I wanted to sort of explore in different ways in this novel. I feel like I'm veering from the point. Was this, yeah, more or less. Okay, we'll tie it up there. Yes, that's what the novel's about.
Yeah. So there's also this point about comedies, and I think in the book they have this discussion on why there was more comedic theater in the Arab context and so on. That's also, if you want to add anything. No.
I mean, I just thought that was a funny thing that I discovered, that there were these versions. As I was looking at the different Arabic translations of Hamlet, there were some with happy endings, which I thought was really funny. Yeah.
And then also the character of Maryam is very interesting, because you would think that Sonia and Hanan are the main characters or protagonists, but Maryam brings so much reflection into it, and you saw even in the staged reading she questioned the interpretations. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about her as a character?
Yeah, she's kind of everyone's favorite character. She's like very, very forceful. She's a little bit annoying at the beginning. Sonia finds her annoying, but also quite enchanting. She sort of falls in love with her in a funny way. She's attracted to her sense of purpose. She really knows what she's doing. She's also very idealistic. She has this kind of utopian idea of what theatre can do as this live art form in an age of screens. So she's constantly trying to get the cast off their phones. And she wants it to be high art Hamlet, but at the same time she wants a big audience, so she puts a pop star in the main role who can't act. So she's sort of she's an emotionally febrile person as well, so she has her moments of difficulty. But she's the kind of even though Sonia is our narrator, Maryam is kind of the person she's gravitating towards. It's this person who, unlike Sonia, really knows what she's doing. She has a sense of mission, and that's something and she's a mother as well, and that's something that Sonia is very attracted to. And I also just wanted to write a novel about powerful Palestinian women as well.
That's great. It would be interesting to know more about the switch in the modes of writing from your first novel to your second one. They are completely different books. I feel that in the first one, also you have the notions of nostalgia being very present in this idea of exile or present absence. What made you write this second book so differently?
I don't know. I mean, the first one was kind of scholarly in certain ways. I mean, we did a lot of research and oral histories and mostly recording my grandmother, but a lot of other elderly people as well, and spending time with historians and in archives and so on. And I wanted to write something that was playful, actually. Obviously, it's a heavy subject matter, but I found actually that when I've only done 3 now. I'm finishing my 3rd, but I found that often when you're writing one, there's another one that's starting to kind of germinate. And it was just sort of in my mind, and I was ready to start when I started. I don't think I had any particular plans of like, oh no, I'm going to completely change mode. It was what I felt like doing.
If you allow, I would like to pose a bit of a more personal question. You describe in the book, recognizing the stranger that I mentioned before, quote, common narratives that all kids in the diaspora grow up with, the narrative of displacement, woe, and oppression, unquote. How have you dealt with the weight of these memories, and how does writing in English impact your engagement with these questions?
I mean, it's sort of there. I think I said it. I began writing about Palestine, and so my literary coming into being and my political consciousness are sort of one thing. And I don't know. I think I maybe was very naive when I started writing. I was like, my first novel, I wanted it to be about Palestine before the Nakba. Even though the novel itself doesn't make any arguments at all, I just wanted to write a kind of very classical, almost Bildungsroman style novel about a Palestinian man. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I use writing as a tool to learn more than I do to argue anything. I think it's my mode of engaging with the world and being curious about the world, more than trying to win anybody over or to make a point or anything. And now I'm writing something that's about the Bandung conference, which is sort of going in another direction. But again, it's motivated mostly by what I feel like and what I want to do. I think it's very, I think with the genocide, it was very difficult to write fiction. And it made me very conscious of the ways that when you write nonfiction, you make an argument, you're making a point, you're saying something specific. When you write a novel, it's not like that at all. It's like a very weird kind of disembodied dream experience where there's no point to it. It's completely pointless. And that's why it's beautiful. But it's when you feel like, it can make you feel useless though, so I have a feeling of uselessness. But I was never trying to, I never wanted to convince somebody of something.
But you also have this scene in the book where, first of all, the father in exile sort of is very present, but then also the sisters return to their memories of being a child and visiting Palestine as a child. And then there's this key scene where they meet a hunger striker, right? And it seems to completely change their worldview and also to shape how they grow. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, it's an episode of, it's during the second Intifada. Oh no, it's during the first Intifada because they're children. It's at the very end, and there's a young boy who has been on a hunger strike who won't stop the strike, basically. So their uncle takes them to see him. And it's a kind of catalyst moment for both of the sisters. Hanan, it's the beginning of her political awakening, her understanding of the condition of her people. And Sonia has this, partly because of how connected she feels to the boy, she has this feeling of, I never want to come back here. And it's actually what makes her turn away. It's so traumatic for her. So that's, yes, it's a sort of fork for the two girls.
Thank you very much. And so in your new project, you already mentioned it, it's more about the solidarity dimension, right? The global dimensions, but I assume Palestine still echoes there. If you can say a few words about it, or is it too early?
Briefly, I haven't found my elevator pitch, but it's about the Bandung conference, which was seminal conference in 1955 in Indonesia. It's where the non-aligned movement basically began. It was Gamal Abdel Nasser, Sukarno, Nehru, Zhou Enlai, all of these figures from Asia and Africa to talk about how to make a world after empire. And it's very well known, this moment, the Bandung spirit. It's very famous in the global south. It's largely forgotten in the global north. I'm writing about an Indian photojournalist and a Lebanese secretary who is the secretary to the Lebanese delegation there. And the second half takes place in Lebanon in 1966. So it's about this, a moment of internationalism, actually. I was thinking about third world internationalism and the ways to make multiple different national histories meet in a novel through the friendship between women.
So in a way, you bridge between a character who moves out of Palestine, a character who returns, and then a completely different worldview that opens up. And at this point, I would really like to thank you very much for this illuminating conversation. I would also like to thank Maryam, Lamis, Katharina, and Sima for bringing the novel on stage, I believe for the first time. Thank you all very much for being such a kind and interested and supportive audience. And I believe you will be signing books in the entrance, which is wonderful, so you have an opportunity to ask a question there as well. And I wish you all a wonderful evening.
Thank you.